Welcome, infrastructure admins, to this focused exam prep explainer. Today, we're zeroing in on Objective 2.1, exactly what Prism Central is. We're going to comprehensively break down the multi-cluster control plane for your Nutanix Certified Professional Multi-Cloud Infrastructure 7.5 certification. And hey, we aren't going to rush this. We want to really dig into the underlying why so you actually understand the architecture, instead of just rote memorizing a bunch of facts. Let's get right to it.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll hit the multi-cluster control plane, architecture and scale-out rules, deployment environment constraints, exam traps and edge cases, and finally wrap up with key facts to memorize.
All right, Section 1, the multi-cluster control plane.
So, what actually is Prism Central? Fundamentally, it's your multi-cluster control plane. Think of it as the ultimate overarching management umbrella for all your environments. I mean, before a tool like this came along, as your infrastructure scaled up, you'd find yourself logging into dozens of individual clusters manually. And let's be honest, that turns into a massive management nightmare real quick. It eats up your time and skyrockets the chances of configuration drift. Prism Central solves this. It sits way above the individual clusters, providing single sign-on, global analytics, and truly centralized management. It literally acts as the single pane of glass for your entire Nutanix cloud infrastructure. Now, you're absolutely going to need to know the distinction between Prism Central, or PC, and Prism Element, which we often abbreviate as PE, for the exam. Let's ground this with a concrete example. Imagine you're an admin with data centers scattered all over the globe, right? Let's say you've got sites in New York, London, and Tokyo. Prism Element is your local manager. It lives directly on that cluster over in London, and it only handles the local storage, local virtual machine creation, and local hardware health just for that one specific London site. But Prism Central, that is your global dashboard. PC lets you sit at your desk, log in exactly one time, and manage New York, London, and Tokyo all simultaneously. So the big takeaway here, PE is local to one single cluster, while PC is global across multiple clusters.
Moving right along to Section 2, Architecture and Scale-Out Rules. When it comes to deploying Prism Central, you've got two main flavors. You can spin it up as a standalone single Prism Central virtual machine, which we refer to as a PCVM, or you can go for a robust scale-out architecture. Now, the scale-out option specifically requires exactly 3 PCVMs. You might be wondering why choose one over the other. Well, you scale out to significantly increase both the capacity and the resiliency of Prism Central. By scaling out to 3 VMs, you're essentially trading the computational cost of running 2 extra virtual machines in exchange for high availability and built-in load balancing. And as you know, in enterprise environments, that resiliency is absolutely critical.
Let's put this into a real-world scenario. If you deploy those 3 PCVMs, how do you actually log into the system? You definitely don't want to be tracking 3 separate IP addresses and constantly pinging them just to guess which one is the active primary node today. Instead, you configure what's called a virtual IP, or VIP. The admin experience here is just seamless. That VIP acts as your single point of access. It really doesn't matter which of the 3 underlying PCVMs is actually processing your request on the backend. You just type that single virtual IP into your browser. It routes your traffic effortlessly and handles failovers totally invisibly. Oh, and here is a massive rule to remember for the exam. All 3 of those scale-out VMs must run on the exact same cluster.
Section 3, Deployment Environment Constraints.
Okay, listen up, because this is a huge distinction. How Prism Central behaves depends entirely on the hypervisor environment you drop it into. If you are in a native Nutanix environment, meaning you're running the Acropolis hypervisor, AHV, and the Acropolis operating system, AOS, you get the whole shebang, full functionality, including that awesome 3 VM scare-out we just talked about. But if you deploy Prism Central into a non-Nutanix environment, specifically VMware ESXi, you are going to face some heavy constraints. The underlying reason for this is that the advanced Nutanix native microservices actually require the native hypervisor hooks that are only found in AHV. Because of that, ESXi deployments are inherently boxed in. Let's take a closer look at those specific limits.
On ESXi, the constraints are seriously strict. You are strictly limited to a small single VM Prism Central instance. There is literally no option to scale out to 3 VMs. You can't even bump up the size of that single instance to a large or X-large later down the road. It's locked in. Furthermore, you're only getting basic Nutanix cloud infrastructure functionality here. So if you are hoping to use advanced portfolio services, like Nutanix Disaster Recovery or Flow Network Security, you're out of luck. Those are simply not supported on an ESXi-based PCVM.
Here is another classic exam gotcha: software upgrades. In a native Nutanix environment, you are totally free to use the direct upload upgrade method. But on ESXi deployments, no way.
They do not support direct upload at all. When you're sitting there taking the test, try to visualize the interface in your mind. If Prism Central is running on ESXi, you strictly require the Lifecycle Manager, or LCM, located within the Prism Central Admin Center to execute any software upgrades.
Real quick before we move on from environments, a warning. Examiners love to test your memory on the ghosts of hypervisors past. Don't fall for the legacy traps. Prism Central deployments on the Microsoft Hyper-V hypervisor are completely dead and gone. Official support ended way back with version PC.2022.6.0.12. So if a test question tries to offer up Hyper-V as a valid deployment target for PC 7.5, recognize it as a deliberate trap and just move right past it. That brings us to Section 4, Exam Traps and Edge Cases.
Picture this scenario, because it is prime testing material. You've perfectly deployed a 3-VM scale-out architecture on an AHV cluster. Everything is running smoothly. Then, suddenly a major failure hits your environment, and 2 of those 3 virtual machines crash hard. What actually happens to Prism Central? Does it manage to limp along and stay up on that one remaining VM?
The answer is a hard no. Prism Central becomes entirely inactive. This is a super common point of confusion for admins who just assume a 3-node cluster of any kind can always survive on a single node. But for Prism Central, a 3-VM scale-out architecture provides a fault tolerance of exactly 1 PCVM. If one goes down, the other 2 pick up the slack without missing a beat. But if 2 fail, the whole Prism Central instance is going offline.
The documentation is crystal clear on this. Scale-out provides a fault tolerance of exactly 1 PCVM. The remaining 2 instances will balance the load if 1 drops, but 2 failures bring the entire system down. Memorize that rule for the exam. Fault tolerance equals exactly 1. Keep your radar up for these 3 specific edge cases too. First up, if you enable microservices infrastructure, you have to ensure the IP addresses you assign do not conflict or overlap with your existing management subnets. If they do, you're going to cause immediate routing failures. Second, looking back at ESXi deployments, the vSAN health service must be actively enabled for the deployment to even function correctly. And third, regarding your network topology, Nutanix simply does not support Prism Central or the clusters it manages in NAT-deployed environments. If there is network address translation sitting anywhere between PC and the clusters, it's 100% unsupported. We are almost at the finish line. Section 5, Key Facts to Memorize. All right, rapid fire time. Fact number 1, lock in this specific prerequisite. To execute a fresh deployment of Prism Central 7.5, your underlying Prism element clusters must be running a minimum of Acropolis operating system version 7.0.1.9. You literally cannot deploy PC 7.5 if your foundation clusters are running an older AOS version than that.
Fact number 2. We already talked about how you can't scale out on ESXi, but there's a physical sizing restriction to be aware of too. If you deploy an XSmall Prism Central VM, scaling out to 3 VMs is physically unsupported, and that's regardless of which hypervisor you're using. The XSmall size is strictly designed for single VM deployments, usually just to manage older legacy clusters.
And finally, fact number 3. This is your ultimate lifeline. Whenever an exam question asks you for the maximum limit of clusters you can manage, or the absolute maximum number of VMs Prism Central can support, please don't guess based on some old PDF you read 3 years ago. The definitive source is always the Nutanix Configuration Maximums tool. Why? Because those limits scale dynamically based on the exact PC VM size and the specific release version. Memorizing static numbers for max VMs is a total trap. The Configuration Maximums page is your only true source of truth.
So we've broken down the what, the why, the strict architectural constraints, and the absolute limits of Prism Central. Knowing all these boundaries, think about your own global data centers for a second. If you had to architect a resilient control plane for them tomorrow, would you deploy a single VM, or are you fully ready to scale out? I highly recommend jumping into the Nutanix Configuration Maximums tool right after this to map out your own scenarios. Best of luck out there on your NCP-MCI 7.5 exam.